Today we're going to talk with Gretchen about how to work in experience design and what that is and what that means. Just a quick introduction, and I will let Gretchen do her own proper intro, but Gretchen has over 35 years experience in brand management, experience design, and placemaking. Currently the VP of Strategic Partnerships at G&A Design in New York, specializing in experiential design, and then served on the board um, of the Society for Experiential Design for 6 years, including a term as president and an adjunct professor at the Corcoran College of Art and Design. So really a perfect person to speak to us about this topic today. And I think that all of you should make the absolute most out of this experience and ask as many questions as you can throughout today's chat. Quick introduction of who I am. So I'm the COO of ArtBound Initiative, and we're an internship program for aspiring designers, producers, artists, and content creators. And we've placed over 1,000 interns through our program within the creative industry over the past 10 years. And then brief little rundown of today's talk. So number one, Gretchen is going to present about experience design and also her career journey. We'll get into ArtBound Initiative and how to land an internship in the creative industries. I'll give a brief intro about who we are, and it will be open Q&A for both myself and Gretchen. So as we go through today's conversation, I love great questions, and there's actually a small group on the call right now, and all of you, showed up here for a reason instead of watching the recording afterwards, which is to be engaged and to be able to have your questions answered. So as we go through today's chat, anything that comes to mind, if you're thinking about the topic at hand, whether it's experience design, if you want to ask questions about career, Gretchen's career journey, if you want to ask questions about early career stage, to myself about that junior placement side of things, please utilize this session to get all of your questions answered and put as much as you can in the chat, because that's a great way to be engaged and to get the most value out of this topic today. Fantastic. So I'm going to stop sharing screen and hand it over to Gretchen to do your own proper introduction of who you are.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you all for being a part of the discussion today. I am going to switch over and share screen, if you will bear with me for just a minute. Let's see. Okay, everything's showing up, Ben, on screen?
Yeah, it's looking good.
Great. Okay, so what I'm going to do with you today is I'm going to take you through a very brief sort of background for both myself and the company, and then I'm going to show you how I got where I am today, and sort of the trajectory. And I will tell you this, and I hope that it's actually encouraging to most of you. It's not a straight line. It's circuitous. It took twists and turns, but what's really fascinating to me when I did my own journey map over the years that I've been out of school, out of college, was that what I aspired to do when I was young actually ended up happening, and I didn't really see it as it was unfolding, but it's what ended up happening with my career. So I found that kind of fascinating. Um, so I'm going to start out with just a little background about myself. I'm going to actually minimize the screen for a second with the photographs. I could never decide whether I wanted to be a graphic designer or an architect. And so I was the only female in the drafting classes in high school. And I just had this enormous curiosity about how things were built and what was behind the scenes. And at the same time, I loved graphic design. So when I actually went to look at colleges, I went to look at colleges that combined both, that had both the graphic design and the architectural schools, and looked at probably about 15 schools across the country. My poor parents were exhausted by the whole process. And when I actually went to the programs, I want to sort of point to the image that's over on the right-hand side, because you're probably wondering why there's a pair of ice skates. Um, I put on my first pair of skates at 6 years old, and they couldn't get me off the ice. And I basically competed up until the time I went to college. So the programs that I looked at also, where possible, had an Olympic training program. I was actually accepted at a college, Miami of Ohio, and they had the Olympic training program for ice skating and they had a graphic design program. So after all this looking and going from one school to the other and finally deciding that I was going to pick Miami of Ohio and getting accepted, I can't actually tell you what happened, but I had this epiphany where I went, you know what? There's no way I can do both of those things well. Like the hours that it'll take for graphic design and the hours that it'll take for the training. And most of the athletes at that time, the Olympic athletes were between 14 and 16 years old. So I decided that I had to leave ice skating behind and I was going to focus on graphic design. And I proceeded to go home and tell my parents that I had changed my mind and I wanted to go to school at Arizona State, where they had an excellent graphic program. And a friend of mine had shown me a catalog, and they took one look at me and said, okay, you can go, but you're going to go without seeing it, and we're going to drop you off, and we're done. And I went, okay. So I did. And that's where I actually ended up going to school. I absolutely loved it. I had a moment of fear when my parents drove off in the car and I was in Arizona and I'd never been there before. So it was slightly jarring. But anyway, that is just sort of, I want you to kind of remember the thread that I talked about from the very beginning, which is I could never decide if I wanted to be an architect or a graphic designer. And by the way, I hate math. So when they actually talked to me about college level algebra and trigonometry, I was like, I'm leaning toward graphics because I really don't like math. And now I use it every day. Let me see if I can get this to advance. So that's a little bit of a precursor about me from the younger stages. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the firm that I work for at present. The name of the firm is G&A Strategy and Design. We were previously a firm called Gallagher and Associates. I have been with the firm for 26 years. Of my entire career, that is over half. Our reach is global. So we work we've done 750 projects. Right now, we probably are closer to about 900. We've worked in 30 states and 24 countries, and that continues to grow. I know some of you are on here from Australia, and some from Southern California, and we have projects in both of those places. So I'm really lucky because we learn so much from the projects that we do in the different cultures, and we are not confined to the U.S. However, our offices are in Washington, D.C., New York, and Portland. We used to have an office in Singapore, and during COVID, we decided that it was just as easy to do work from the U.S. Overseas as it was to control an office, which is quite difficult in Shanghai. Or Singapore. So we did close that office and we do all the work here in the US. Um, our work really spans quite a diverse different sectors of work. So we work on everything from music and the arts to natural history and science to social and cultural history and corporate experiences. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a video in a minute because I think it's much easier to see what we do by watching the video and bringing it to life. But what I will say is that at the end of the presentation, I'm going to answer a question about what exactly is experience design and what do we do. So I think as you look at these images, when you look at walking into an attraction or a museum or a branded environment, our job is to really bring that story to life and to create an environment that is infused with the graphic language and the sounds and sights and objects that are associated with the culture and or brand. little bit of I think it helps to bring some of these projects to life. And you can see from the examples that are there that they really are a diverse array of projects that we work with. So I'm going to take you into what I mentioned a little bit earlier. When I was asked to talk about how I ended up doing what I do for a living, I decided the best way for me to actually talk to people about the different types of jobs that I've had and what actually caused me to go from one to the other and what changed in my role and what changed in the type of firm I worked for. So, this is the journey map that I put together that tells you, yes, I did graduate from college in 1982, which sounds like I am myself an artifact. And this journey map goes up until 2026. What I think is really interesting when you look at this and what I'm seeing about a lot of the younger people that we're hiring at the office is in all of these years, which is now 44 that I have been in this business, I have been at 5 places, and I am presently at the place that I mentioned earlier, where I've been for 26 years. So I don't do a lot of moving around, but I have experienced a vast difference in the size and the type of work that, and my actual role in the places. So, um, I'm going to back up just to the left-hand side to mention that I have a BFA in graphic design. I teach graduate school, but I did not go for graduate school studies. I went directly into the workforce in my senior year. And my very first job that I had was at a boutique design studio in Dallas, Texas, that was very much an advertising agency and a design studio. We had about 5 staff, and I was a junior graphic designer. And I stayed at the small design studio for about a year and a half. A friend of mine was working at HOK Architects and called me to mention that there was actually a position that was open at the firm in the environmental graphic design group. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term environmental graphic design, it is basically the most simplified description is it's visual communication in the built environment, right? So it can be anything like wayfinding, orientation, large scale murals, graphics, and so forth. But it is very much a problem solving and a visual mapping in the environment. Um, HOK Architects was the first job that I had that went back to that thread I talked about in the very beginning, where I brought graphic design and architecture together in my job. There were about 1,600 people at Gensler, or excuse me, at HOK at the time, and I was at the office in Dallas, Texas. Um, I think it's really important to talk about how I got this job. I went in to do the interview with one of the principals of the firm, and I had zero experience in environmental graphic design. So I put a portfolio together that showed my illustration capabilities, my graphic capabilities. I studied on what exactly environmental graphic design was, and I told the principal that I was interviewing with why I felt that my graphic skills and my problem solving skills could extrapolate into the job that they were putting forward. The interview went great. I went home. I got a call that they had one more hurdle to go through, but they intended to hire me, and I was thrilled. Um, got all set up to start my job. Got another call 2 days later where the same person I'd interviewed with said, I am so sorry, but the last person that we had to speak to hire you really felt like you needed more experience in environmental graphic design, so we're going to have to rescind the offer. And I was like heartbroken. So I said to him, how about this? How about if you give me an assignment and you give me 5 days, 5 working days to get that done, access to your library and all your resources, and I will come back to you with my solution to that problem. And if I do the job correctly, I get the job. If I don't, I agree, I will not have this position. Got the job, as you can see. And I think the moral of the story for me in that particular case was, sometimes, interviewing can be so depressing and it can be so demoralizing. And sometimes when someone says no and you've had such a fabulous interview and lead up to the final decision, maybe no doesn't necessarily mean no if there might be another way for you to show what your skill sets are and to prove yourself. So for me, it worked, but I think you do have to really pay attention to the body language and the messaging that you're getting. I stayed at HOK for 3 years. I did not leave because I didn't like my job. We went through what we used to call Black Mondays, where I don't know why they call them Black Mondays because they turned in pink slips for the people who were being laid off. But at the time, my office was 500. Um, there was an oil, banking, and real estate crash in Texas. And as you might imagine, looking at what's happening right now with oil prices and what happens to the economy, it really made a dent in our staff. So I ended up asking my boss if I could take on work on my own while I was getting my work done at the office. And until my last day, I was going to start to get some work on my own. I started my own firm, which was called Cost Creative at that time. I had 3 full-time staff and 8 contract labor individuals that worked for me. I will tell you that this is very much like what I hear about what's happened during COVID with a lot of people saying, I think I'm going to go out on my own and I don't really want to work for a firm and everybody's working from home. So I'm not really sure that I want to go back into a work environment. So I went to work on my own because it was sort of a stopgap for me. I was going to do it until the economy got better, go back and work for someone again. And lo and behold, that lasted for 11 years. And so a lot of my clients were people that I had worked with who were then at other firms or had started their own firms. So about 10 and a half years in, I called a business and life coach. I asked her to come in and evaluate me, evaluate my business, talk to me about my strengths and weaknesses, and talk to me about my business's strengths and weaknesses because I actually really, really missed being around a group of energetic, intelligent, fabulous people that I could learn from. And I was in a position where I had my own firm. So I felt like my learning curve had really sort of slowed down, and I wanted to be surrounded by people I could learn from. So at that time, her comment to me was, well, if money were no object and you could do anything you wanted to do, what would you do? And I said, I would call my friend at Disney. I would get on the project that's happening in Florida. And then after that project's over, I'd go work for someone again. And so she said, well, okay, so like, why don't you call your friend? And I went, okay, fine. So I did. Um, at the same time, weirdly, I got a call from a headhunter who said, I have an architecture firm, really fabulous firm on the West Coast. They're looking for someone to run their graphics group. And I'd really like to talk to you about it. And I said, no, not interested. I really want to, I've worked for an architect before. I really want to work for more of a design firm. And so thanks, but I don't think so. So the person heading the LA office came to my office and asked if he could just talk to me and persuade me to come to LA for an interview, which he did, as you can see from the next place that I went, which was at Gensler, at the architecture firm. But at the same time, I went to interview at Disney. So I was interviewing for a position at Imagineering, and I interviewed for the position at Gensler. And I ended up taking the position at Gensler primarily because um, I was able to build my entire team. I came into the firm as a vice president. And at the time, Gensler was one of the large, I think they still are the largest architecture firm in the world. At the time I went to work for them, they had 53 offices and 7,000 staff. So Imagine going from having three full-time staff people and eight contract labor to having my own team that I could build, and money was no object. I ran the group and I was a part of a 7,000 member team. Um, I will tell you that the hardest part for me was to go from being what I would call a seller doer. I would get the work. I was the primary person who would be in front of the clients, and the people who worked for me were really support as opposed to in front of my clients and doing most of the actual design and conceptual work. When I went to Gensler, my job was to be a creative director and to back away from being a doer and more of a leader and a director so that I was able to transfer my knowledge to the people on my staff, keep things nudged in the right direction, but not necessarily be the person actually doing the work. And that was a really, really tough transition for me. I will also say that when I went to work for Gensler, some of the people who were there had been on staff for quite some time. And about 2 months into working at Gensler, one of the senior designers pulled me aside and said, I know you came here hoping to make positive change and bring your energy and, take us to a new level, but I was already happy before you got here, and I kind of wasn't interested in any kind of change. So, I'm having trouble with the change that is happening in our team, and with the idea that I don't feel like I was interested in this much change. So, I really think that I learned a valuable lesson in that when you go to a position of leadership and you're hiring a staff of talented people, one of the things you have to be really careful of is to learn how to lead and then get out of their way because you'll lose them if you don't. And you've probably been in those kinds of positions where you feel like you don't have enough agency and you're not getting enough of the control. So, last but not least, I ended up at Gallagher and Associates because I got to a point at Gensler where I felt like I was a small, small part of a giant architectural machine. And what I did and what my team did was sort of added on, sort of attached to and at service to architecture, but not at the forefront of it. So I wanted to work for a firm that actually specialized in what I do and bring it from the graphic design and environmental graphics to more of the experiential design and take it to that next level of something that was much more multidisciplinary and much more from the perspective of experience design and focused on what we do. So I came in as director of business development because that is what the firm needed at that time. I then transferred into a position of Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, and I mentor the business development team. But my primary role is to work on strategizing and growth and partnerships for our firm and looking on the global landscape of how we not only grow, but how we work with universities and groups like Ben's group. And we look at how we are expanding our network from both the education and mentoring and corporate responsibility side and from the partnerships and getting new and exciting work. So that is my story from start to now. We're not finished yet. The asterisk that you see indicates where I was in my 20s and 30s. So you will see that when I started Cost Creative, I was really young. And I learned a lot of lessons about being a younger individual owning my firm and what it takes to actually stay afloat on those things. So that is my part of the presentation. And Ben, I will hand back over to you.
Great, thanks, Gretchen. That was that was amazing, and I have a lot of questions for you. already in the back of my head. I'm not sure we'll get to all of them, but I hope everybody on the call has some good questions too. I'm going to take a quick moment just in the middle of this while all of you think of your questions that you want to ask Gretchen to talk about ArtBound Initiative briefly, and just kind of go through who we are as an introduction. But in the meantime, please think of your questions, put them in the chat, as many as you got, and we'll go through them in chronological order. Um,
Great.
yeah, and Gretchen, I'll give you a moment for a water break, or
Ah, thank you.
if you need it. But that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, so just briefly into ArtBound Initiative, we are a global internship program for creatives. You can think of us like an extra course that you take outside of your university, but offers a lot of value in practical implementation because we have a guaranteed internship placement. So it means that you're doing a course and learning through us, but you're receiving a guaranteed outcome. And we basically help university students and recent graduates to bridge a gap between their university and their career, specifically within the creative industries. We're a small team, so one thing that's really important about us is that we have really hands-on support for each of our participants and that it's a program that's dedicated to the participants that come through it. There's a lot of destinations that we have available if you're looking for internships. So within the US, New York, Chicago, LA, Miami, and Austin. In Europe, London and Berlin. We have a couple in Australia, Melbourne and Sydney. And then if you're not based in any of these locations and you still want to do an internship and maybe moving to these locations is financially out of reach for you, virtual internships are a great option. You know, this is working with companies who are set up to be remote or hybrid and provides a great opportunity for you to still add something to your resume and to your experience. In terms of internship types that we have five main domains. So advertising, communications, you know, if you're coming from a marketing or advertising or business or writing background, PR, these are great outlets for you. Design, graphic design, motion, branding, art direction, and some of these can combo into an experience and inexperienced design as well. Fashion, so on the business side, looking at marketing, wholesale, PR, editorial, entertainment media. We have a lot of students that come through for TV, film production, content production, post-production, and then fine arts, you know, working for an artist or a gallery or an institution. So those are the main areas that we have. And typically we'll take students who are, you know, studying these areas, but I see there's a lot of like finance majors here today. You know, I think if you have an interest or if you have a minor in a specific area, that would still allow you to enter in. And you can always discuss that with us. Now, how it works is that when you go through the admissions process into our program, we're going to work with you to develop your strategy. So that means what are the destinations that you're interested in, what's the timeline, and what are the internship types. And we'll find you something within your strategy. 98% of our participants are getting placed in internships, so very high success rate. And for the 2% or 1% that we're unable to place, we provide a full program refund. So there is a guarantee that you can count on there. Now, a few program inclusions, which I'll run through in terms of what to expect from the program. We are something that you pay for, so I want you know, what are all the things that you get out of it, and you should take as much as you can out of this program if you decide to move forward. Um, Number one is access to our ABI Academy. This is a pre-internship preparation course that is all about the practical things that you'll need to both get an internship and then to succeed in the internship. Gretchen, you talked about, you know, having a portfolio that was aligned with the role that you were looking for and understanding the etiquette of how to deal with the interview process, right? Those are all things that we go through in practice sessions and also with coaches that are working within the industry. Um,
Yeah.
and then making sure that you're going to succeed in the internship. You know, you don't want to just get it, but you want to make sure that you're building opportunities and jobs out of that. So this is all online. It's a part-time thing that doesn't require too much of your time, but is the nuts and bolts of what you need to be able to get started. Some of our coaches, just to name a few, but we have many. You know, they work in production would be for Warner Bros. Or MTV. You know, in design it's like Omnicom, Ralph Lauren, you know, Shutterstock, Aquent, which is a creative recruitment agency in Australia. So there's a lot of great coaches that you'll be learning from in the program and having conversations with and getting portfolio and resume feedback from. Number two is our guaranteed internship placement. So this is really the what a lot of our participants come to our program for is to get an internship. And you know, if you're looking to do something internationally, or if you're an F1 student in the US and you need, this to meet your visa requirements, or you're doing something for academic credit. Having something guaranteed really allows you to count on us to make sure that you're going to get that in time and within the requirements that you have. Internships could be between 3 to 6 months in duration, part-time or full-time, for credit or for experience. But about 60% of our participants are getting hired post-internship, whether that's in a part-time or full-time position. So I think this is a great stepping stone for you. One thing to note, you should definitely budget for an unpaid internship because a lot of internships are still unpaid. So it's something for you to just take into consideration as you consider this program, but really leveraging that into potential employment opportunities later down the line. Just flipping through some of our company partners, I'm not going to go through the details of each of these, but I just want you to kind of see some of the caliber of companies that we work with and also some of the opportunities that exist. And we have over 300 company partners, so this is just a small list of some of the highlighted ones. Yeah. Great. And then if you're traveling internationally, you receive travel support from us. So we handle the visa processing, insurance. We have optional housing arrangements, and then you receive an in-city orientation. And then our team provides support throughout the entire program, through that ABI Academy, through the placement with partner companies. We do the heavy lifting. You're really just showing up for the interview. And then once you land in city, making sure that you're situated and you have events and other types of things to meet other program participants. And then last but not least, you have access to our community. So this is an app with our alum where we post job boards. We have different types of events going on, but it's a great place for you to connect with people who have been through the program. And then we do events in city. And remember that people who've been through the program are now more senior in their position. So, you can connect with people that are working for some amazing firms and say, hey, look, I'm in the same position that you were in, and I'd love to connect and grab a coffee. And that's a great place to get started. I did mention we have a tuition, so our program fee for our domestic or virtual program is 22.50, and then if you're going internationally, it's 32.50. That includes everything that I mentioned. It doesn't include um, third-party fees like visa, housing, flights, but it does include everything that's on our program side is part of that fee. And then we have a grant for financial needs-based students. So if you're coming from a needs-based background, you can apply for the grant as well. And that can be up to the full program fee for our local and our virtual programs. And then briefly on how to apply. So if you are graduated or graduating and you're thinking of doing something in the fall, or you're in Australia and you're thinking of doing something over your summer, now is the time to apply. May 10th is our deadline. And the application process is really quite simple. So I'm just going to briefly touch on it and then I'm done with my part of the spiel here. You'll need your resume, portfolio, and a couple of academic references. And then if you're applying for the grant, you're going to submit, check out the documents you need to submit there. Go to start your application. You'll fill in everything here. I'm just going to explain one thing. Everything else is self-explanatory, but within the internship information, this type of stuff, it's not set in stone yet. So if you're still trying to figure out what you want to do, where you want to go, just put to the best of your ability, and then we'll talk about it in the interview and develop a strategy together with you. There's no fee to apply. You only, commit financially once you're accepted into the program and you decide to move forward. So this is a great way for you to get a one-on-one chat with our team and also think about, next steps in your career if you want to send in an application. All right. So I'm just going to stop sharing screen here, and I'm also going to put in the chat that application link in case it's of interest for later. And we'll get back to some of this chat here. So I'll kick off the questions then, and for those of you that are on the call, if you have some questions for Gretchen, we'd love for you to put that in the chat here.
Yeah, and if you guys can, would love to be able to see you. It's so much easier to see faces than black squares. So if you feel inclined, please, turn on your camera as
I
we're
agree.
going through the Q&A.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
So Gretchen, I love, you've worked, I want to dive in a little bit to G&A where you're working now. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about what your current role actually entails. Like, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So in my current role, I am primarily concerned with what we call our strategic partnerships. So I'm going to back up for a second to talk to you. When I talk to you about partners, I want to talk to you about the kinds of people who work with us and for us. Okay, because I think this whole group, we have some people from finance and marketing, fine art, and I think we also had business. But what's interesting about us is that we are multidisciplinary. So the kinds of people who work for us are architects, graphic designers, writers, people who do marketing. Um, Interestingly, which people usually don't know, our strategy team does business and operations. So imagine being the International Spy Museum. Um, a museum is a business. If a business cannot get enough revenue to operate, to have its staff, and to be successful, they don't remain open. And you see a lot of this happening in China and in Europe, where museums open, they don't have a plan, and they can't sustain themselves, so they close. So I think that as you're looking at companies like ours, because we are an amalgamation of all these disciplines coming together to create the experiences that we have. I then am looking at our outside partners. So when we hire an architect, when we want to team with a fabricator to get things built, when we need a filmic experience and we're doing something that goes inside these experiences, when we're doing a sports attraction and we need someone who is going to help us with our social media and our marketing and campaigns. So my role is to deal with both our internal partners and our external partners to be able to put teams together to do the work that we do on an ongoing basis on that.
Cool. That sounds like a really interesting role and across like a lot of different yeah, you get a lot of face time with a lot of different people who are involved in the business, right? Which is
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I think the most incredible thing about what I love about what I do is that when I started in more of an ad agency, um, there's a singular focus for the most part in an ad agency. And the depth isn't there, right? When we're working on a cultural story or a music museum or a subject that's really deep and emotional, there's so much upfront work that goes into understanding the culture, understanding the story, understanding what this can be and molding it, and then actually taking it all the way through making it happen. And it is a fairly long process in a lot of these cases. So an ad agency or an ad campaign typically is a very quick, very, it's like start to finish, it's, pretty compressed. Our longest project, I probably don't want to tell you this because you're never going to want to work for us, but our longest project is a campus in New Orleans, which is the World War II Museum, and there are 7 buildings, right? We've worked on it for over 20 years, but so it's really interesting to look at the way that all of us always are teaching each other, and you walk in a room and you learn something every time you start a new project, which is really fun.
That's so cool. Yeah, I didn't think about that as well, which is just the amount of time that you spend on something really differs, you know, from say experience design. You
Yeah.
mentioned G&A has had over 900 different projects around the world, which is an incredible amount of work. Uh,
Yeah.
and what are some of the projects that really stick out to you that you feel like are just super memorable or that you thought were the most interesting? Um,
It's so interesting. I usually tell the young people who interview with us and the students that I work with, you have to be slightly schizophrenic because you might be working on one of the projects I mentioned earlier, the International Spy Museum in the morning, and in the afternoon you're working on Gettysburg National Military Park, and so it's like it's really it can be a bit jarring because you literally have to compartmentalize your brain and go, okay, I'm going to put that down and I'm going to pick this up. So I would say for me, one of my favorite projects was the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. It actually started as a project that people don't understand how complex the spycraft industry is. And the gentleman who was the benefactor for the first museum was actually a coder in the war. And so he was so interested in the exchange of information in a secretive way that he had a part of when he sold his cable and TV company and had lots of money. He wanted to create a museum that honors the profession that and what spies go through and what is it like to be an international, in international espionage and what does it mean to our country and our freedoms and our and so forth. So the interesting thing about it is that not only was it historically really important, but it was they let us do it in a way that it was fun to learn, right? I think the other part of it was that it became an economic driver for the area that was completely depressed at Gallery Place, Chinatown in Washington, D.C. It was horrible when we took over the six historical buildings. So it was just so successful that it's in its second home. And we call it Spy 2, and it has revitalized a second area at L'Enfant Plaza in Washington, D.C. So I think for me, that's probably the one of my favorite and most memorable projects.
Cool.
Probably the Ocean Hall at the Smithsonian Institute. I mean, the idea that this whole idea of what water really means and marine life really means to
Mhm.
survival on our
Yeah.
planet and I mean, it's the Smithsonian. So the specimens and the depth of what you learn from these scholars and these people is just fascinating. But the funniest thing was when I walked into the lead designer's office and like some of the specimens like were these big jars sitting on his desk and there were like three of them and it was like yuck. Like what is that on it? Because when they're in formaldehyde, there is no color.
Yeah.
So my job was to do all of the graphics and all of the donor and sponsor materials. And I was like, that is not what we're doing. Like, so
Yeah.
I want so much color and so much vibrancy and so much like energy that if that specimen were to come to life, that's what it would look like. And this
Yeah.
is what happens when it's
That's
in the
funny.
ocean. So it was really, I mean, I'll never forget walking in there and going, oh man, that's just, yeah, I don't know why you have that sitting on your desk, but that is not, no.
That's really
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, tell us a little bit about like entry level into G&A. What are some of the things, that you look for or that the firm looks for? And what are some pieces of advice that you have for people who are looking to enter your industry or any industry really in terms of approach to, portfolio interview process, et cetera.
Yeah. I would say this. I would say if we're looking at our design team, Um, we love hybrid individuals. Like for instance, you know how I said I could never decide if I wanted to be a graphic designer or an architect. I understand physical space. I happen to be a graphic designer. When we have people who understand user interface and design and behavior and the idea that what you're doing isn't just design for design's sake, what you're doing is design so that you can actually get to somebody. You can actually deliver a message that resonates and stays with someone, and they learn something that they didn't know before they came in. So, the idea that if you have curiosity and you have the ability to leave your ego at the door and go, I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I know I was just hired and I feel like I have to prove myself, but to be vulnerable in those ways that you open yourself up to learn because I mean, I always feel like if I stop learning, and I have been doing this for a long time, if I stop learning, then I get bored. So, I think that curiosity, like never lose that ability to ask questions and not, there's no bad question, right? But I think that's where the younger people in the office, it's like just get to know people and ask questions and sit in on things and just, use that time with those people for however long you're there to learn as much as you can from people who don't do what you do.
Yeah. I think for I think for a lot of young people starting out their careers who don't yet have, 10 years of experience learning that piece of it, because that comes with time,
Yeah.
um, there's a lot of pressure, or there can feel to be a lot of pressure to prove that you're worth being there,
Ugh.
and
Yeah.
and that is misperceived. So I think that the trying to prove that you're worth being there can come across as, okay, I got to show that I know what I'm doing. And
Yes.
that's the opposite of what a company who's hiring a junior is expecting from the proof of being there. What they're expecting from the
Yeah.
proof of you being there is, I'm curious, I want to learn, I'm excited, and I don't know anything, right? I know the basics, but
Yeah.
please teach me. And that
Yeah.
type of approach is where people are like, okay, you're definitely worth being here, because what they're looking for is not hard skills at that stage. They're looking for the soft skills. They're looking for the piece that is going to allow them to mold you into exactly
Absolutely.
what they're looking for. Yeah.
Well, and I also think there's this, I always say this to the students that I work with, and I swear I wish I could say it to some of the people that work for us that have been there 7 to 10 years. And that is, never forget that you have to actively listen, not passively listen to people. When they are giving you feedback, you know how so many times you're thinking, yeah, you have to stop talking because I already thought about what I wanted to say and I need to say it. So you stop listening about 1/10 of the way through something that someone's saying to you. So the idea that learning to really, really actively listen to people, and when you're getting critiques, look, we're all attached to what we do. And I can say leave your ego at the door, but we all have egos. That's fine. You get attached to what you're doing, you get emotional about what you're doing, and then a client says, yeah, I don't like that. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. It's not resonating with me. And your body language as a designer, and especially as a young designer, is not to sort of show how unhappy you are that the client didn't fall in love with what you spent all this time doing, right? And so you can feel it, you can think it, just don't show it. And remember that the client might isn't a designer in most cases. They're a
Yeah.
subject matter expert. They love what they do. So your job is to be the visitor advocate and go, yeah, I know that you're a curator with the Smithsonian and you want us to put 18 pages on one text panel and no one's going to read it. So we have to distill it down to something digestible. And so the idea that you, if you can get accustomed to feeling like criticism and critiques aren't about you, they're about improving something that will then go to another iteration that, regardless of whether you agree or not, you have to think about making alterations to. And that's hard,
Yeah.
especially when you go, God, this is great. And you go in and you're so excited, and they're like, mm-mm. Nope.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be really challenging. And Luis asked, do you feel that your experience as an athlete actually gave you that humility?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you asked that question. No, because I truly, truly believe that the fact that I could never master everything when I was skating, it's like you learn one thing and then you learn the harder one, and then you learn something harder, and you get down, you fall and you get up, and you fall and you get up, and you fall and you get up, and your coach is constantly pushing you, and it's not good enough, right? And so I will tell you that I think that one of the things that I don't do well is I am very hard on myself. So you couldn't be harder on me than I am on myself. And it's not a great characteristic to have. However, I do think it's pushed me to always be better than someone expected me to be because I'm going to want to do something better than you thought you were going to get. Right.
Mm.
And sometimes you can get in your own way, and sometimes it's like, being a perfectionist or pushing yourself harder than you should, yeah, it can get tricky, in that. But yes, I think that my athletic mindset, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
also want to say, I'm
mm.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
There's also a project management side of this, and I want to say this. I am now doing business and strategy, but I'm a designer. And because I was sort of put in a position where we needed someone who would focus on business development in the beginning, I learned to be creative and strategic and have fun with something that's not always fun, which is getting business and doing proposals and going and talking to people. And so I would tell you that our project managers and our business people and our strategists are some of the most important people in our entire firm because they are the ones who bring the longevity to these projects. And our project managers are the ones that are the bridge between the designers who are always wanting more time to design because we want to, just keep going, and the people who are going, yeah, but we have a schedule. And so, time to finish, pencils down, go. And then, by the way, what you just designed is not what the client told us they wanted to see. So you're helping the designers adjust before they get in front of the client and bridging the communication gap, right? And so they keep the trains running on time, they keep the budgets, they keep the schedules, they keep the designers and the communication open. And I will tell you that we have more projects that end in a troubling way because the communication breaks down and the project management breaks down than the design breaking down. So
Yeah.
it's really important.
Yeah, communication is really everything in business, and I think that I've worked with some firms before, and I've been on both sides of this, but I've worked with some firms before where where they might be doing great work, but it's really hard to have a relationship with them if they're not
Ugh,
communicating that through. And my background originally was in hospitality, which is completely different, but that was a big piece of learning is like, hey, you only have a few touch points with the guest that's coming in the door. And
yeah,
so what they see and experience is the only thing they see and experience. And if you're doing a bunch of work in the background to make something happen, but you're not communicating to that to them, or you're not helping guide their experience in some way, they don't have any idea. They're gonna
yeah.
walk out feeling pissed, in some way. But I hate
What
to
I
wrap
would
this
say,
up.
oh, yeah, that's
I'm
right. You
sorry,
got to
Gretchen.
go.
I have a call in 2 minutes, so I hate to call this a wrap because this I could keep going. This is great, and I love this conversation. Gretchen, I want to thank you so much for
You're
taking the
welcome.
time here. I am putting in the chat my LinkedIn, Gretchen's LinkedIn, as well as the website for G&A because I think it's really important. First of all, connect with us. Send me a message on LinkedIn. I answer all my messages. Like anytime you have questions about your career or
Mine
something
as
like that,
well.
please do it.
Really,
Use those
anything
connections.
you have, we're happy to answer after the fact. So please feel free to let us know.
Perfect. I love that. And Gretchen, thank you for preparing a great presentation. And I think this discussion is not over. It's to be continued at a
Great.
future session because there's a lot here to unpack. And yeah, thanks for those of you that showed up on the call. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks,
Wonderful.
everyone.
All right.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.